Hello, this is Beth. Thank you for joining me for today's V.I.P yoga video. So as a reminder, V.I.P stands for Variations on Individualized Practice. And in each of these short tutorial videos, we focus on a particular pose. So today's pose will be chair pose, or utkatasana in Sanskrit. Chair pose is another one of those yoga poses that has many different names. It's also called fierce pose, thunderbolt pose, awkward chair, which I think is kind of the most appropriate name, and it's called powerful pose too. So any of those names, it's all chair pose, and we're going to talk about some ways to vary it to fit the chair pose best in your body. And that is the goal of V.I.P yoga. It's an individualized practice where we practice many different variations. We use a variety of props, and you'll see them on the mat behind me. And we go over as many different options as possible. Not every single option. There are countless ways to vary yoga poses to fit your body. That's a functional yoga practice. So join me over by the mat, have plenty of props around, and we'll go through chair pose. So we usually start with the classical version of the pose, and classical version just means how the pose is typically taught in many classes, how you've seen it in books or magazines. So for chair pose, I'm going to turn to the side in a moment, but you want to find a width of the feet that's comfortable for you, and we'll go over that variation in a second. Be at a little bit of an angle. The key to chair pose is flexion, and you'll have flexion at the ankle joint, flexion at the knee joint, and the flexion at the hip joint. So all those things work together. You'll see at my ankles, my knees are bending forward a bit so that my ankles flex, my knees are obviously bending, and then I'm flexing right here at where my legs meet my pelvic girdle. So those are the actions of chair pose. The back is long. Sometimes you'll see it with the arms out in front, sometimes with the arms overhead, heart center. So that starts to get into some of the ways that we can vary chair pose. We can vary the arms, we can vary the legs, and we can vary the torso. The very first thing I want to mention is how far you sink down to your chair. So as you're bending your knees, sometimes in my classes I'll say, you might be sitting on a bar stool, right? You might be fairly high up in your chair, and that's fine. If this is a comfortable pose for your body, you're feeling some stretch, you're feeling some work in your lower body, that's the functional yoga pose for you. Or you can take your chair pose deeper, and then you can start to vary your arms. So varying the position of the arms and the legs is ways that we can change the pose. If I want to be steadier and just focus on the lower body, because this is a lot of work, I can keep my hands at heart center. I can place my hands on my hips, encouraging that grounding, that sinking in of the lower body. I also like to place my arms out. I sometimes call this Frankenstein arms, reaching the arms away. And this can serve as a nice little counterbalance for your chair pose. You can bring the hands together, keep them apart, and then they can also go up to any degree. So they can go up overhead to an angle. They can go more overhead. They can come out into a cactus shape. So I don't often put my arms overhead in chair. Feel like it strains too much of my shoulders and upper body. All right, I'm ready to come up from this version of chair pose. And then with our feet, chair pose is often taught with the feet close together. I don't find that to be comfortable. I like my feet a little bit wider apart. That gives me more stability, making my chair a more solid chair. You can choose where your solid chair is. Maybe your chair is more like a little love seat and you need a little room there to feel comfortable in your own body. That's good. So you can be a nice wide chair, be a big welcoming armchair. You can choose that version of chair. So in we start with the basics and then we vary how deep we go or how low we go, vary the arms, vary the legs. Then we can start to incorporate props. That's always the next step, is if something's still not feeling comfortable or right, props are our friend to adjust the pose and sometimes make the pose even more challenging for us. Where I'll start with that today is with a rolled mat. You can use a rolled towel, a rolled anything, a cushion. I'll back it up and I'm going to put my heels on the rolled mat. So this can help if I'm having difficulties with my ankle flexion or something's not comfortable at my feet, to bend into this. And you'll see I bent down lower because it was easier for my body to access with the rolled mat under my feet. And then same thing, I can choose to put my arms wherever I want. Maybe here, oh, it does feel a little more accessible to lift my arms a little bit more. And then the next prop is a block. Now remember, these props don't have to be used independently. You can layer on the props. So I'll show the block with the rolled mat. You absolutely are welcome to use them together or separately. So you'll see I have a couple blocks here. This is a little thinner than the standard block. This is a standard block 3 inches across on the short side. It just might make a difference for the thickness of your own legs and what feels most comfortable for you. I'll try the thinner one today, and we're going to place it between our legs at the upper thigh area. So right there, I'll stay facing forward. Oh, I said I would do it with the rolled mat, right? So I'll do it with the rolled mat. And this gives me something to have a little bit more of an action of squeezing my thighs together. It helps me engage my IT band, the muscles of my outer hips. Those are the abductor muscles. Then I can sink down, I can engage. Maybe I'll keep my hands at heart center for this one. And so that's my propped version with the heels and with the block at the same time. So this is tiring. You might notice I'm starting to get a little bit winded. Chair pose, I often say it's the pose that people love to hate. Not necessarily everybody's favorite, but who knows? Maybe it was your favorite. So now we're going to try chair at the wall. And as always, there's a few different ways that you can do that. The first way, I'm going to back up to the wall so you can still see my front. So 2 different ways to do this. One is to do it sort of in a squat position. If you've ever done a wall squat, so to have your entire back, I'll scooch over a little bit, have your entire back against the wall and really focus on that flexion in your lower legs. There's not a lot of ankle flexion in this because right now my ankles are straight up with my leg bone. So if I want to also work on the ankle flexion, then I can put back just my butt up to the wall. So back the butt up or back the bus up to the wall, bend my knees, and then allow myself to get a little bit more ankle flexion, but supporting my hips, my bottom. And of course I can play around with any arm variation here. Sometimes it feels nice up to the wall, a little bit of cactus arms here. And then the other version of doing a wall for chair pose is to turn around and place the hands on the wall for support. So you're going to see my backside for a second there. Let me turn around. I'm going to bend my knees, and in this version, I can practice the overhead version. And you'll see there, I was able to get a little bit more of a down dog shape to my upper body. I could use the wall's resistance to really press away in the upper body, and that was very helpful for me. So you can try that version too. All right, we have a few more to go. This would not be a chair pose practice without doing a chair pose. So I'm going to bring over my blocks, clear off my space a little bit. So the blocks are optional here. It just depends on how high your chair is and how close your feet come down to the floor. So for the chair pose, you want to be seated right on the edge of your chair. And you're looking for those same actions that we did standing. So feet on the floor. The more you come forward a little bit, you can start getting the ankle flexion. In fact, you can scoot your feet closer to you to get that ankle flexion even more. We've already got the knee bend, and then we can start hinging forward from the hips, and you'll see I'm in the exact same shape as I would be standing. Of course, this is deeper, and I can even play around with lifting up a little bit, doing a brief hover there. The arms can go anywhere, so all those arm positions apply to all the poses, just not going through it again each time. So that's your chair pose. If your chair feels high and your feet feel far away from the ground, here's where you can put your feet on blocks, and this will actually help you to try to get even more ankle flexion. So a great example of how using props can go deeper into the pose. So really there, I can push into my feet, I'm going more deeply, and staying here, my body is working hard to maintain the shape. It's really imprinting what this shape feels like in my body. It's great work for starting here and then bringing this to my standing practice if I choose to do that. Okay, I think I have 2 more versions for you today. And yay, we're coming down to the floor. Always my favorite place to go. All right, for these last two versions, the one shape that we're going to do that you might not think of as a chair pose is kneeling, and we'll kneel into a puppy pose shape. This is sometimes used as an alternate for downward dog. And as we do that, you'll see that the shape is pretty much exactly the same as our standing chair pose. It's just changing the orientation of that shape. So I'm going to come down to hands and knees. I'll move my chair a little bit out of the way. And from hands and knees, I walk my hands forward. I'm going to keep my toes tucked for this version in order to get some of that flexion. And then I'll start walking my hands forward, extending my back. So you'll see I have the knee flexion, the hip flexion, and the ankle flexion. And I could keep my hands here, or I could melt my heart to the mat. So that is a nice version of the pose that takes some of the gravity out of it and allows the body to relax and release a little bit more. The last version we're going to be doing is on our backs. This will be sort of a face-up version of chair pose. Before you think it sounds easy, we'll talk about a few things that can make it harder if that's where you want to go today. So come into your back. You come into a chair shape, a kind of square or 90-degree chair shape. So this is the basic shape of the pose. And then again, we can have our arms straight out. This is also a prep for a dead bug pose. So this version here, upside down table or upside down chair, this might feel pretty accessible for a lot of people. It's a great place, again, to take the gravity out of the work in the knees. You'll notice that our ankles are not really flexed, so we can flex them more here. And then we have a 90-degree flexion here in the knees, in the hips, which is probably more than you're going to get in your standing chair pose. To make this more challenging lying on the floor, to spice it up a little bit and include the abs, you can slide your knees further away from you. And so you have to work not to overly arch the lower back, and that's where engaging the abs comes in. So the more you slide your knees away, keeping them bent as in our standing chair, that's going to be a much different kind of challenge on your body. And then the last thing you can add, you can keep your knees closed. And since we're not as much flexed past 90 degrees at the hips, you could raise your torso. And as you might know, that's also going to be a little bit of ab work. All right. If you choose to add ab work into your yoga practice, that is totally up to you. So those are our variations today on utkatasana, or chair pose, also known by many other names. Awkward chair is my favorite. Please join me for some of the other practice series here in V.I.P Yoga. You'll find the link to the playlist here. Thank you for joining me today, and have a great day.